Welcome to another edition of the Dublin Coffman Marching Band Network. If you enjoy these series, please like and subscribe so that you can learn more about our amazing graduates. With us today is someone who I have known almost my entire life. Randy Luikart is joining us, and he is a 1977 graduate of Dublin High School. How are you this morning, Randy?
Doing well. Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you. You have a wealth of experience that I'd like to dive in, not only from the business side of things, but also your volunteering and also being a band dad in our organization. So I would like to start off, Randy, that when you graduated from Dublin High School in 1977, Dublin looked a lot different than it currently was. Randy, can you just tell us, you were before the Dr. Keller days and now the Mr. Bradstreet days. Tell us what band was like back in 1977 when you graduated, your experience here at Dublin High School.
Yeah. Well, things weren't really in black and white back then, regardless of what the yearbook pictures looked like. But, that was a period of time that Trent Holtzberry was the band director at the high school. It was actually in between Jeff, because Jeff Keller came right out of college as an undergrad and, was the band director for a period of time. And then he went back to OSU and got his graduate degrees. And, of course, I was a student of Jeff. I was a trombone player. So I had been taking lessons from Jeff, well, gosh, probably since I was in junior high school or maybe a little before that. I certainly had a lot of contact with him over the years. And then that band program back then, I'm trying to think back to how many kids we would have had in the band. So I remember a full row of trombones. So we had at least 8 at the time, probably pretty close to a full row of sousaphones. It was a good sized group. But it was also the first class, mine was the first class to go all 4 years at what was then the new high school on Coffman Road, right? So we had, this wonderful new building. It's very interesting to walk through the band center at Coffman these days because, I can see on the upper story, right, which I think today may be where the orchestra rehearses and, that was the original band room, right? And you came out the doors there to that kind of catwalk in front of it and looked down into the gymnasium. So I remember a lot of times, like for band concerts, we would go down into the gymnasium, we'd pull out risers, these kind of rickety, noisy risers. We'd hook them all together, we'd make a stage, right? And for a band concert, that was fine. That worked. Very interesting for musicals when you got people dancing, like you had a dance troupe, because they were really noisy. Everybody bouncing and then things creaking. But that was the day, and it was I don't think all that different from a day-to-day activity, right, from the student's perspective. But certainly a little different with the facilities and what we had access to. The auditorium today is just a wonderful thing.
We actually talked about that to the pep band the other day, where you would actually come straight out of the band room and jump over the rail, and there was the basketball arena right where our PAC is now. Yes, we still try to keep those memories alive for our current kids. So, Randy, you went off to be a music education major at Ohio State, and you spent 14 years of being a band director in Southwestern City Schools. Can you tell us about your experience there?
Yeah, so, right, I came straight out of college and got a job at what was called Pleasant View Middle School. It was actually a former high school, and they had, built some new facilities in Southwestern, and so it turned into a middle school. But I was fortunate enough to have a very nice auditorium with a band room right off that. We started students on band instruments in the 6th grade there. So I had 6th, 7th, and 8th grade band students. Over the years, I taught a little bit of general music and some other things, but primarily was band. I'd have a pretty good sized program. I had about 120 kids that would start instruments in the 6th grade. Pretty large group, could barely fit them in the band room. And then, by the time you get to 8th grade, and I suppose I, would lose a few, but we still have a pretty good sized group, probably about 70, 80 kids, So it was a great time. I got a lot of support from my administration. I learned a ton, as you probably know, Jeremy, but they don't teach you in school about how to do band programs, right? You learn all that in your first couple of years. So, the most fun I had, of course, just seeing someone start off not knowing which end to blow in. And by the time they left my program, some of them were pretty accomplished musicians. And that was great to see. So, wonderful times.
Well, in the middle of that musical journey, you took a different course where you went off to Nationwide, and we're going to dive into a little bit of your career in the technology, the financial technology end of business. As you made that transition from being a band director into the corporate world, what was that transition like for you?
It was quite different. In teaching, and of course, being a teacher, you probably know a lot of teachers belong to a teachers union, and they're actually fairly regimented, descriptions about jobs and responsibilities and things of that sort. And in the business world, maybe not quite as much. It was a little different, especially where I went, because I went to a subsidiary of Nationwide. It was a company that Nationwide had purchased, and they didn't quite have all the same structure that Nationwide did. So you wore a lot of different hats. So I came in and I was doing a lot of programming. I did come in as a programmer and help to write code and create applications that people would use or make them better. But at the same time, maybe it was because of my teaching background and my performing background, they kind of recognized that I was comfortable in front of groups, and I could talk to groups of people, and I could engage in a dialogue about our products and our services. And so I was there about a year, and then they said, "Hey, would you come along on some sales calls?" And so I ended up going on a number of sales calls and really being that kind of face of the IT area. So the salespeople would be working with another company to have them get interested in our products, and then you get to the point of saying, well, what can you really do for us? And that's where they kind of bring me in, and I do a lot of talking with our potential client about, well, what do you want to get done? Well, here's what we can offer. Maybe we can do some things together. So there was that was the interesting part of the job, and probably the unexpected part of the job too, was how that grew into more of a sales role. But I still had a lot of the technology stuff that I had to do day to day. So there you go. That's how it was.
So now in after spending 25 years at Nationwide, you've moved on to Humana. I think our parents were under the occupational theory that you get a job and you stay there for 30, 35 years. And as you've pivoted from band directing to Nationwide and now in your current role, what do you think is some good advice for our kids in understanding about their occupation and the longevity of their careers?
Yeah. Well, things are changing. They're changing rapidly. And especially if you're in a technology field, I forget what Moore's law is, but it's like every 4 years there's some doubling of some aspect of technology change going on, right? And so being a lifelong learner is probably the key. Always looking for that challenge and expecting and anticipating and valuing the change that's going to happen, trying to be part of that change, I think is important. So, there are folks that do like to get into a job and probably have it be the same day after day. And there are those that value that change, that look forward to the change. I would just say in my experience, I've seen people that, tend to be a little happier if they're prepared for that change, because it's likely to come within your lifetime. My career choices, initially it was my choice to change jobs from teaching to more of a technology field. After I made that change, there were a lot of, different paths my career took, and some of those weren't my direct choice, right? So as technologies changed, as the company decided it needed more expertise in one area or another, areas would get shut down and other areas would get opened up. And if you weren't prepared to make that move, then it might have been a rougher time for you. For me, I always tried to embrace those, look forward to them, looking for that next opportunity, things that excited me, even if they weren't necessarily things that I knew immediately how to do, right? So just being willing to learn something new. I think that's most important.
And in your current job at Humana, what is it that you enjoy most about your day-to-day activities?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of different things I enjoy. One part of this job and others that I've enjoyed is the figuring out problems. So, I'll go back to teaching, right? And you're trying to help a student. The first day, a flute student trying to produce a sound, right? And they can't get a sound out of their flute. And there's a problem to solve there. And trying to understand the kind of the details of that, what's the technical nature of their issue, and helping them to solve that. And today, I do that same kind of thing where people have a problem and they're like, we don't understand how we're spending all this money on some aspect of technology. It doesn't seem like we're getting the value out of it. Can you help us understand that, right? And so, yeah, I like doing those kinds of solving those kinds of problems, doing that kind of research. So that's what's always intrigued me about any part of any job I have, whether it's current or old, has been that, yeah, I want to find a problem and solve it.
Well, as a band director myself, to have you as one of my band parents, you filled many roles for our program. You were not only a band camp staffer. We won't call you college staff, but you helped out with our trombones many years, and you were a big volunteer for us. You ran our concession stand, and doing these types of activities as a volunteer takes a tremendous amount of time. And we've never talked about it, but I would only assume that you were finding some value out of your participation in keeping our program and our concessions fundraising part of it going in the right direction. What is it that you enjoyed about volunteering for our band program?
Well, I think it's just being part of the work that's going on, being there and supporting the activities of the team, so to speak. I was lucky in the fact that I could contribute in a few different ways. You mentioned being at band camp, both as a kind of the chaperone aspect, the parent aspect, as well as being able to help students with the music. But, when my oldest son was starting to go through the program, and I had been their soccer coach over the years, and I had been their Boy Scout or Cub Scout leader or whatever. And I was like, they're at a point in their lives where maybe they don't quite need me directly as much, but I still want to be involved. What can I do to be involved? And, this opportunity came up, and I thought, yeah, that's something I could do. And I just enjoyed doing that. And, and then the aspects of the job of working with all the different band parents and, getting to know people and being part of that social group, that also is obviously a fun part of it.
I have always admired your social media presence. Over the past couple of years on LinkedIn, you've made a lot of outstanding contributions to social media in connecting the role of what music can provide a student and how those experiences go directly into the corporate world. As your own sons, Christopher and Nick, came through our program, what is it that you saw that benefited your own kids the most in now them going through college and starting off on their journey?
Well, there's lots of different aspects to that. I mean, primarily it was one of maturity, right? So now you're in an organization and an activity where it's, of course, your own personal contribution, right, that you bring, right? How well you play an instrument, or how well you march. and learning to do those things better and continuing to improve your musicality, your marching precision, that all is great. And I think, a very helpful thing for them. But more than that, even, I think, is just the maturity that was necessary for them to, kind of fulfill their own expectations, right? They're their own unique individuals. They each have their own, desires and their own strengths and weaknesses. But I think both of them just came in, of course, being a freshman, wide-eyed, like, what am I getting myself into? And then figuring out, okay, here's how I need to change and become part of this and support it, so that the outcome and the value of the group is increased, right? So that we do great performances. And I don't let my band members, my teammates, down. I think that was a key part of what they learned and, what they got out of that program, which is, that's a life lesson that you can't put a price on.
Well, Randy, as someone who's contributing to this series, one of the things I like to try to incorporate into my questions is now that you've had the experiences that you've had, and not only being a student in the band, but you've taught kids music and these same life lessons that we're talking about. You've had your own kids go through a musical group. What is it that you would say to any parent that's looking at, whether they should continue on in music, continue on in an organization? What is it that you see the longevity of for someone who is wanting to go through a high school music program?
Yeah. I can't think of very many other experiences that are going to knit together all these different aspects of what it can take to be successful in the world today. I mean, there's you can kind of divide the human and maybe into a couple of parts if you want. One is kind of the technical, I got to learn these things, and I got to have this set of knowledge. And then there's kind of the artistic, maybe more emotional side, where I have to be happy as a human being. I have to know how to interact with others on an emotional, level. And this really brings that all together, right? Because you're learning to do things that you may not think you could do when you started, right? I go back and think about starting kids from scratch on instruments, and how many of them are like, oh, I'll never be able to do that. They'll listen to, they were sixth graders, and they'll listen to an eighth grade band play, and they'll be like, oh, I'll never be able to play like that. And then, you get there, you take that moment to reflect back and go see how much you've accomplished over the years. Is a tremendous, uplift and growth experience for them. So, like I said, I can't think of too many other opportunities that students get that allow for that to all be knit together and to make a whole person. So just, I know it may not be for everybody, and not everybody could, find the time to do it, but it certainly is something that I'm so happy I did and that my children were able to do.
Well, Randy, I want to thank you for spending some time with us. You bringing your knowledge and your wisdom to our series, I'm very grateful. So thank you for spending some time with us today.
I'm glad I could do it. Thanks for asking me.